Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When ex-forest officer Cody Nash hosts a peaceful lakefront cookout, he doesn't expect a power-hungry HOA president to storm in like she owns the land. But when fake laws, forged maps, and midnight sabotage unfold, one thing becomes clear. This isn't a neighborly dispute, it's war. I never thought hosting a summer cookout on my own land would end with a woman in a white pantsuit barking orders into a walkie-talkie like she was coordinating a SWAT raid. But I guess that's what happens when you put a paranoid HOA president next to a man who actually owns his own lakefront. It started off as one of those perfect early summer afternoons in southern Missouri. Sunlight slanting through the sycamores, the scent of charcoal rising with the breeze, kids squealing as they paddled kayaks just past the shoreline. I'd spent the past year fixing up this place. 48 acres of half-forgotten paradise my gut told me was worth saving. Old ranch land, bordering the north half of a private lake. My name's Cody Nash, and when I left my job as a forest conservation officer to go full-time restoring land for eco-recreation, I never expected the real threat would come from a woman named Karen in a blazer with a clipboard. The picnic wasn't anything wild, just a dozen or so friends and their families. I'd mowed the meadow down near the water, set up a big canvas canopy over the tables, brought out the good cooler full of drinks, and even rigged a Bluetooth speaker under the dock for low-key jazz. Nobody was loud. Nobody was drunk. The fire pit hadn't even been lit yet. And, most importantly, nobody had crossed into anyone else's property because my property line was crystal clear, literally marked by survey stakes and 2 sets of historical records I'd had notarized and laminated in my office. Then she showed up. I noticed her first by the glint off her badge, which looked like something between a mall security pin and an overambitious realtor tag. Karen Ellsworth, president of Silver Bay Lakefront HOA. I'd heard the name. She lived across the cove on the developed side of the lake, where homes all looked like vacation brochures, and the residents liked to pretend the water belonged only to them. She was flanked by 2 middle-aged guys in matching HOA logo polos and a stocky guy with mirrored shades and a HOA patrol patch sewn onto a tactical vest. Yes, a tactical vest. They didn't come around the lake. They crossed over my fence line down the path I'd cleared last fall, marched right onto the grass like they owned the damn place. Karen didn't even blink at the kids playing on the paddle boards. She locked eyes with me like I was the cause of global warming. "You need to shut this down immediately," she snapped, holding her radio like it could summon drones. "This is unauthorized use of a community recreational resource. HOA bylaws prohibit unsupervised gatherings of this size at the lake without advance approval." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" She stepped closer, motioning to the dock. "This lake is public, shared by Silver Bay residents. You're violating usage protocols. No amplified music, no structures within 50 feet of the shoreline, and absolutely no swimming without board notification. These people need to pack up and leave." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Karen, this land you're standing on belongs to me. I bought it, I restored it, and this side of the lake is not, has never been, and never will be part of Silver Bay. My surveyor confirmed it. The county confirmed it, and your HOA documents don't extend 1 inch past that maple tree at the property line." Her nostrils flared. "The lake is a community resource." "Not this half," I replied, gesturing toward the water. "This shoreline, dock, and 100 feet into the water are legally part of my land. That includes subsurface rights. Your authority stops way back there at the HOA." Sign one of her polo-clad sidekicks looked visibly uncomfortable, but Karen doubled down. "We'll see about that. I'm calling the sheriff. You're endangering children with alcohol, unsupervised swimming, and unlicensed watercraft." I glanced at the lake, where 2 kids were quietly floating in kayaks wearing life jackets. Then at the adults chatting over grilled zucchini skewers and sparkling water. My guests looked more like a church potluck than a rave. "Go ahead," I said. "But I suggest you call them for yourself too, because you're now trespassing." Karen ignored that and turned to her security guy. "Brad, document everything. Get photos of the dock, the setup, the grill, and especially the children near the shoreline." I almost laughed. "Brad, you might want to take photos of your boss breaking Missouri trespass law too." 10 minutes later, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived in a cruiser, pulling onto the gravel turnaround just off my main trail. I recognized one of them, Deputy Sanders, a guy I'd worked with before on a forest access case. As soon as he saw me, his expression went from cautious to, "Not this crap again." Karen met them before they were fully out of the car. Loud, dramatic hand gestures, the whole performance. She claimed she was protecting the lake, that I'd brought dangerous guests to a shared community zone, and that the HOA was fully within its rights to remove unauthorized users. Sanders finally cut her off mid-sentence. "Ma'am, I need to see your documentation." She whipped out a printed HOA map and some bylaws. I handed Sanders a laminated copy of my deed, my boundary overlay from the county, and a letter from the Department of Natural Resources confirming my riparian rights. They both looked over the papers. Then they walked off and had a hushed conversation at the edge of the woods. I watched Karen pace like she was ready to file a lawsuit on the spot. Eventually, Sanders came back over to me. "Mr. Nash, your paperwork checks out. You're fully within your rights to use this land and shoreline as you see fit, so long as local ordinances aren't being violated. And I don't see anything out of line here." Karen overheard. "You're kidding me. He's blocking access to the lake." Sanders raised a brow. "Ma'am, your HOA's jurisdiction ends well before this dock. If you or your patrol were enforcing anything on this land, you were doing so unlawfully. Mr. Nash is within his rights to pursue trespass charges." Karen's face twisted like she bit into a lemon. "This isn't over. The board will be hearing about this. We'll take it to the county." "Do that," I said calmly. "But you'll be trespassing if you step back on this land again without permission." Karen gathered her crew like a general retreating from a failed siege. Brad gave me a half-apologetic shrug. They marched back up the trail in silence, past the very visible private property sign they'd apparently ignored on the way in. The party resumed. Kids got back in the water. Someone passed me a burger. I laughed it off for the moment, but something told me that wasn't the last time I'd see Karen. I should have known Karen wouldn't let things go. People like her treat boundaries like suggestions, especially when they come with lakefront views. I wasn't surprised when the sheriff deputies drove off without incident, but I was a little surprised at how long the calm lasted. That is, until the next morning. It was just past 6 when I stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, ready to enjoy the stillness before the heat kicked in. The lake was glassy, untouched. Mist curled above the surface like it was trying to keep secrets. Then I saw something that made me freeze mid-sip. My dock. The one I spent 2 weekends reinforcing and resealing. Someone had wrapped chain around the support beams, running it in a crisscross pattern like they were trying to immobilize a sea monster. There was a big yellow tag hanging from the middle, laminated, branded with an official-looking HOA logo, and the words, "Temporarily closed, HOA, Eco Safety Enforcement, do not use." I almost laughed out loud. It looked professional, too professional. Someone had gone through the trouble of laminating a forged enforcement order. I put the coffee down and walked down to the dock. That's when I noticed the kayaks. All 3 of them, mine, now had bright red vinyl stickers slapped across their bows. "Unauthorized vessel, subject to HOA removal." I peeled one off. It tore in flakes like cheap adhesive but thick enough to leave residue behind. The stickers had the same logo as the fake dock sign. These people didn't even try to hide it, but it got worse. On the gravel trail leading to the lake where my guests had parked the day before, someone had hammered in 2 temporary signs, aluminum frames with sandbags at the base. They read, "Environmental Access Point, Entry Limited per HOA, Lakefront Wildlife Guidelines." I stepped back, took photos of everything, dock, kayaks, signs. Then I turned and marched straight back to the cabin. I had cameras. Not just trail cams, I'd installed a wide-angle surveillance system last year when some idiot tried to poach deer on my back acreage. I sat down, pulled up the footage from the night before. There they were. At around 2:30 in the morning, 3 figures came down the trail from the road. Headlamps, gloves, carrying toolboxes and signposts. One of them crouched near the dock, fiddling with chains. Another peeled the backing off a sticker and pressed it down on a kayak. They worked fast, organized, methodical. One of them even wore a high-vis vest with HOA Patrol printed on the back, and just like that, they vanished into the trees. I pulled the footage, saved it to a USB, and backed it up in the cloud. Then I texted my attorney. Michelle Watson wasn't just any lawyer. She was a bulldog in hiking boots. Former environmental policy prosecutor turned private land use specialist. The kind of person who didn't just win lawsuits, she made examples out of people. Within minutes, she called me back, already sounding like she was drafting an affidavit in her head. You're telling me they came onto your property in the middle of the night and chained your dock? Affirmative. Stickers on private boats? Yep. Fake signage? You bet. You've got footage? I've got footage from 3 angles. She whistled. I want copies, time-stamped, today. Also, contact the sheriff's office again. This time, we're not being polite. This is a coordinated act of trespassing, property tampering, and impersonating regulatory authority. While I waited for her follow-up email, I called the sheriff's department. I asked to speak with Deputy Sanders again. To his credit, he was already familiar with the situation and sounded less surprised than I expected. We'll send someone out. Leave everything as is if you can. Don't remove the chains or signs yet. We'll need to document it ourselves. They arrived just before 8. Different deputy this time. Younger guy, very by the book. Took photos, asked for copies of the footage, bagged one of the stickers as evidence. He didn't say much until he was about to leave. I don't want to speculate, he said, lowering his voice. But off the record, this smells like coordinated harassment. HOA doesn't have authority past their boundary, and forging environmental compliance notices? That's a serious step over the line. I nodded. Do I need to hire armed security next? He gave me a tight smile. If you did, you'd be justified. By noon, Michelle had already filed a formal notice of intent. We weren't just pressing charges for trespass. We were accusing the HOA of false representation of environmental authority, tampering with private equipment, unauthorized access to private property, potential violations of Missouri Department of Natural Resources regulations. She also sent a copy of the footage to the Missouri DNR just in case Karen decided to double down with a fake complaint of her own. But Karen wasn't finished, not by a long shot. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security system. Motion detected on the trail. I opened the live feed and saw something that made my jaw tighten. 2 HOA board members standing just outside my gate speaking to a local reporter. They weren't trespassing, not technically, but they were holding a clipboard, flipping through maps pointing toward the lake, and giving statements. The news van had a local ABC affiliate logo on the side. When the evening news rolled around, there it was. Controversy at Silver Bay Lake. Private landowner accused of blocking public access to shared waters. They didn't use my name directly, but they showed the dock, the signs, the cove. The story was filled with vague terms, some residents believe, and according to the HOA president, but no mention of my deed, my property lines, or the fact that the so-called public lake wasn't public at all. That was the moment I knew this was no longer a local dispute. Karen wasn't trying to enforce rules, she was trying to seize control. By the time the sun rose the next day, I'd already decided I wasn't waiting for Karen to escalate again. She'd made her move. Now it was my turn. I spent the morning cataloging everything. Every sticker, every bolt on the chain, every fake sign on my land. I photographed angles, distances from the property line, time-stamped everything with GPS metadata, and fed it all into a shared drive that Michelle and I kept updated for legal documentation. When you've worked as a forest inspector, you get used to covering your ass, because nobody else will. Michelle called around 11, her voice sharp and focused. Good, we've got the package. I'm drafting the complaint. But here's the big one. We're naming the HOA as a corporate entity, and Karen personally. We'll hit them for trespass, impersonation of government authority, environmental fraud, and tampering with private property. I asked her how serious that would be. She answered, if the court agrees they faked DNR authority. That's felony territory. I was halfway through removing one of the fake signs when a white SUV rolled up the access road and stopped right in front of my gate. Not the patrol kind. This one was clean, expensive, and fully tinted. When the driver's side door opened, out stepped a man I'd never seen before, wearing a county badge on his belt. Mr. Nash, he called. I'm Officer Brian Harlow, County Environmental Code Compliance. I raised a brow. You hear about the dock? He pulled out a tablet. We received an anonymous complaint about an unlicensed shoreline modification and potential ecological disruption from non-compliant recreational use. I didn't say anything, just nodded slowly. Right, you got a copy of that complaint? He hesitated. It was submitted through an online form, but the HOA was CC'd on the email thread to our department. Of course they were. I gestured toward the lake. You want to inspect it? I do. I walked with him down the trail. As we stepped out toward the dock, he looked around, taking in the signs and remnants of the chain. I explained everything. Who did what, what the sheriff had already documented, what was already sent to Michelle, and how we were preparing to file. To his credit, Harlow didn't look pleased. I'll be honest, this stinks of a coordinated misuse of regulatory process, but I'm here, so I'll do my job. He spent 20 minutes checking the shoreline, snapping photos, measuring the setback from the tree line to the dock's edge. I showed him my county permit for minor shoreline reinforcement, the same one I got signed off last year when I replaced the rotted pilings. When we walked back up the hill, he looked over at me. From what I can tell, you're in compliance. And I'll be filing a note in your case file recommending that this not be investigated further unless new evidence surfaces. I nodded. Appreciate it. Before he left, he said something that stuck with me. You're not the only one getting this kind of thing lately. That HOA's been filing complaints like it's a full-time job. After he drove off, I called Michelle. They're trying to bury me in official-sounding nonsense, I told her, using real departments to do fake enforcement. That's what frauds do when they realize they don't actually own the law, she replied. Time to go public. She was already one step ahead of me. That afternoon, she released a statement to the local paper and news station complete with the county property maps, our video footage, and a certified letter from the Missouri DNR affirming that the HOA had no regulatory authority over my land or the shoreline. We weren't dramatic. We were surgical. We didn't call them criminals. We just let the facts make it obvious. The article ran the next morning under the headline, HOA accused of overreach after lakefront landowner produces evidence of forged restrictions. And that's when the calls started. 2 other landowners reached out to me, both owning small wooded parcels on the opposite side of the lake, both saying they'd recently been pressured by Karen and the HOA to sign lake usage agreements. One of them even forwarded me a PDF he'd been sent by Karen herself, claiming it was a mandatory compliance contract for shared lakefront security. The PDF was riddled with pseudo-legal garbage. My favorite line was, all property owners within visible distance of the shoreline are subject to cooperative HOA jurisdiction. Visible distance. That was the logic now. I forwarded it all to Michelle. That's good, she said. The more victims, the stronger the pattern of abuse. I'll include this in the complaint, but we still hadn't reached the breaking point. That came 2 nights later. I was reviewing security footage when I noticed something new. A flash of light around 1 a.m. near the south side of my lake trail. I zoomed in, headlamp, then 2 more. Someone was back. This time not near the dock, but farther up the slope, near the marker stones I'd placed last winter to clearly define my boundary line. The figures moved slowly, deliberately. One held something bulky, a clipboard, or maybe a map board. The other 2 carried long rods, like survey poles. They were trying to remap my land. By flashlight. In the middle of the damn night, I watched as one of them planted a stake, then another. They marked it with orange flagging tape, the kind real surveyors use. Then they disappeared. When I went down there the next morning, the stakes were still there, marked as preliminary HOA perimeter recon. There was even a laminated sheet stapled to one of them with a Silver Bay logo and the words pending adjustment, parcel review, underway. I didn't laugh this time. I took the sheet, sealed it in a plastic bag, and wrote 2 words on it in permanent marker. Nice try. Then I called Michelle. We're not just filing, I said. We're going scorched earth. There's a difference between defending your land and going to war for it. Up until now, I'd thought I was doing the former, responding, pushing back, documenting. But after finding those survey stakes with fake HOA claims tacked onto them, I realized Karen wasn't playing at some petty game of neighborhood politics. She was building a case, or trying to fabricate one, so she could take what wasn't hers and hope the bureaucracy would be too slow or too lazy to stop her. The next morning, I walked into the county recorder's office with a folder so thick it could have been used as a flotation device. Deed records, GIS overlays, state-verified shoreline maps, and, most importantly, certified drone footage of HOA members trespassing on my land in the middle of the night. Michelle had added a notarized cover letter explaining the nature of the ongoing dispute and the possibility of document tampering within public databases. The clerk, a tired-looking guy named Rich who probably hadn't had anyone yell at him since the last property tax hike, raised an eyebrow when I explained why I was there. Someone tried to remap your parcel? More like they invented a boundary that doesn't exist, I said, sliding over a printout of the laminated stake I'd found with the HOA seal. And I've got footage of the people who planted them. 2 of them are on the Silver Bay HOA board." He muttered something under his breath and excused himself to fetch his supervisor. A few minutes later, a more senior official came out. Mrs. Gray, one of those sharp-eyed clerks who could probably spot a forged plat map in her sleep. She took one look at the printed stake photos and frowned. "I'll check the recent database logs," she said. But if someone attempted to amend the parcel overlay without proper filing, that's not just an error, it's a crime. She disappeared into the back while I waited in a plastic chair that squeaked every time I moved. After about 20 minutes, she returned with a folder and a controlled tightness in her voice. "There was a recent overlay adjustment submitted," she said, 2 weeks ago. It was logged as an administrative update to reflect shoreline coordination under HOA authority. I stared at her. "That's not legal. There's no coordination agreement, and I sure as hell never signed one, I'm aware," she said. The request came through an internal channel, submitted by email using a legacy access code associated with Gerald M. Lawson. That name stopped me cold. Lawson. The old land use director, she nodded slowly. He retired 3 years ago. Died 2 years ago, but his credentials were used to authenticate the update. My mouth went dry. Someone impersonated a dead county official. I'm putting in a formal request for IT to trace the source IP, but I can already tell you, this is bad. Back in my truck, I called Michelle. Her tone changed the moment I relayed what I'd learned. "Forget civil. We're upgrading. That's criminal fraud. Submitting government-grade data under a deceased official's name. That's federal exposure if we push it." She didn't even wait. By that evening, we had filed formal criminal complaints with the county prosecutor's office, the Missouri State Attorney General's office, and submitted the entire digital archive to the Department of Natural Resources and the GIS Oversight Board. Michelle also reached out to a contact she had in the State Land Commission, a woman named Tamara Cray, who'd handled boundary disputes involving mining companies. Heavyweight stuff. The moment Tamara saw our packet of evidence, she scheduled an emergency review. And then, like clockwork, Karen made her next move. The following day, I received a certified letter at my P.O. box, an official-looking envelope with embossed silver trim and the HOA's legal office return address. Inside was a notice of provisional enforcement, claiming the Silver Bay HOA had temporarily assumed interim stewardship of shoreline zoning along the lake for the safety and protection of regional ecology and adjacent homeowners. The letter referenced the updated GIS data, the ongoing environmental inquiry, and, in a move so bold I had to reread it twice, even mentioned pending negotiations with county authorities regarding shoreline annexation options. It was pure fiction, crafted to look like legalese, filled with vague phrases and half-truths. And it ended with a demand. "We hereby instruct you to cease unauthorized recreational gatherings on or near the shoreline until further notice. Failure to comply will result in legal action from the HOA and our partner agencies." I almost hoped Michelle would tell me to frame it for comedy's sake, but she was livid. This isn't just HOA overreach anymore. This is full-blown attempted land theft, fraud, coercion, impersonation of public authority. It's all there. I'm calling in a forensic document analyst, and we're subpoenaing the HOA's internal communications. If we find Karen signed or authorized that GIS update herself, she's cooked. 2 days later, Tamara from the State Land Commission called me directly. Her voice was low, serious. "We ran the access logs. The GIS update came from a business IP associated with the Silver Bay HOA office, submitted under a forged identity. We've initiated a statewide investigation. The dominoes were starting to fall." Then came the final match. An anonymous whistleblower email sent to Michelle, CC'd to the county prosecutor. It was a scanned PDF, an internal HOA board memo marked confidential, detailing a development proposal to convert the North Shoreline into expanded community access waterfront, complete with a line about pressuring independent landowners to accept joint jurisdiction agreements under threat of regulatory review. It was signed by Karen Ellsworth. Michelle called me as soon as she read it. "Get ready. We're taking this whole damn HOA to court." I didn't sleep much that night, not out of fear, but out of anticipation. Something about seeing fraud unfold in real time Watching an entire HOA try to steal land like it was Monopoly night in hell woke up the part of me that used to write violation tickets for illegal logging and water siphoning back in the forest. Service. I dealt with people who thought laws were for other folks. Karen was one of them, wrapped in pastel cardigans and HOA bylaws like they were Kevlar. By morning, the buzz had started. Local news was sniffing around, probably tipped off by the prosecutor's office or the whistleblower leak. Michelle warned me to expect media trucks by the weekend. She also told me to avoid contact with any HOA reps, especially now that formal charges were in motion. Naturally, that meant Karen tried to confront me in person within 24 hours. I was walking the shoreline with my dog, Tess, a mutt with too much shepherd and not enough patience, when a white Lexus crept up my private gravel access road and parked by the edge of the trees. I could already smell the hairspray and indignation before she opened the door. Karen stepped out like she was attending a gala, not invading a crime scene. "We need to talk," she said, ignoring the private property no trespassing sign not 5 feet from her car. "You shouldn't be here," I said plainly. "There's an open investigation." She waved that off like it was weather. "Oh, please. That little tantrum. It'll pass. This is all a misunderstanding, Cody. Cody died in the forest fires. I'm Cody. And I have zero interest in negotiating with someone who impersonated a dead county official." That froze her smile for a second, but she recovered, stepping closer, high heels sinking slightly into my lawn. "You're escalating things unnecessarily. The HOA board just wants to reach a cooperative understanding. Surely there's no need to involve prosecutors, lawsuits, or the press," Tess growled. I looked Karen dead in the eye. "You chained off my pier, sabotaged my kayaks, faked shoreline claims, and forged GIS data to try and annex my land. You made it necessary." She took a breath, like she was deciding whether to explode or plead. Then she did something unexpected. She handed me an envelope. "Inside is a non-disclosure agreement and a private settlement offer," she said. "We're prepared to offer you $100,000 to sign a shoreline coordination agreement and drop the complaints. Think of it as a peaceful resolution." I didn't open it. I just looked at her. "Do you have any idea how stupid that sounds when you're under criminal investigation?" she snapped. "You're no saint, Cody. You think you can just wall off the lake and ignore everyone else? This lake needs guidance, order. We're the only ones willing to take responsibility for it. You? You're just a loner with a dock and a barbecue pit." "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "You need to leave now." She looked at me like she might lunge. Then Tess took a step forward, growled again, and Karen retreated to her Lexus in a fog of white-hot rage. I didn't even touch the envelope, just threw it straight into the fire pit when I got home. That same afternoon, Michelle called. "We just got a response from the state prosecutor. They're opening a formal fraud investigation into Silver Bay Lakefront HOA. Your footage, the whistleblower memo, the fake GIS entries. That's enough for criminal conspiracy." By Thursday, the county sheriff served a search warrant on the HOA office. The footage made the news, Karen standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, while deputies wheeled out file boxes and confiscated desktop towers. A local reporter asked her if she had any comment. Her reply, "Talk to our legal team. This is just retaliation by an unstable man with a vendetta." By Friday, that vendetta got real. A group of homeowners from Silver Bay held a spontaneous community meeting at the Lakeside Chapel. One of them, a retired postal worker named Denise Miller, had come across a line item in the HOA budget labeled Shoreline Expansion PR Consulting. Another found expense reports for survey adjustments and legal templates. By Saturday morning, I had a knock at my cabin door. Denise was there, along with 2 other homeowners. "We didn't know," she said, "about the fake maps, the enforcement notices, the environmental signs, any of it. She told us it was a lake beautification initiative. Said you were being difficult. I invited them in, made coffee, showed them the real maps, the drone footage, even the forged GIS request from the late Mr. Lawson." Denise looked like someone had pulled the foundation out from under her porch. "We want to help," she said. "We're going to call an emergency board meeting. If we vote to dissolve the current leadership, maybe we can show the courts we're not all complicit." I nodded. I don't care about revenge. I just want the truth on paper. But the truth wasn't done showing itself yet. Because that evening, a second anonymous email landed in Michelle's inbox. This one included scanned receipts, transfers from the HOA fund to a shell company named Balin Resources, LLC, listing Karen Ellsworth as a silent partner. The description, Shoreline Development Consulting, proposed dock expansion, private community marina proposal. Karen hadn't just tried to annex my shoreline. She was trying to flip it to developers to sell what she never owned in the first place. Now it wasn't just fraud, it was profiteering. And the whole thing was about to blow wide open. By Sunday, the lake didn't feel like a lake anymore. It felt like a fuse, silent, coiled, waiting for a spark. The morning brought headlines. HOA president under investigation for fraudulent shoreline claims ran across the local station, alongside a photo of Karen ducking into her Lexus while reporters shouted questions. Her name was now being passed around in group chats, Reddit threads, and HOA watchdog forums. But for me, the stakes weren't just reputation, they were land, ownership, and principle. Denise and the other homeowners came through. That afternoon, they held an emergency HOA board vote at the clubhouse, which I wasn't allowed to attend, since I wasn't a member, thank God. But Denise texted me updates live from the floor. Karen was there, so were the remaining 3 board members. A fourth had already resigned quietly 2 days before, after a call from the county investigator. Denise brought a stack of printed drone footage stills, screenshots of the GIS forgery, and excerpts from the whistleblower's memo. She told me later that Karen sat with a frozen smile and said, "Anyone can Photoshop maps." But then came the kicker. One of the board members stood up and asked, "Did you authorize Balin Resources LLC to receive over $98,000 from our operating budget?" Karen didn't answer. Denise said the silence was nuclear. The board voted 3-1 in favor of Karen's immediate suspension, pending the results of the fraud investigation. The lone no vote came from Karen herself. Within the hour, the acting chair released a public statement distancing the HOA from all unauthorized shoreline enforcement activities. It was the first time in weeks I exhaled, but victory was short-lived. The very next morning, I woke up to yelling outside. Not kids, not birds, angry men. I threw on a flannel and stepped outside to find 2 large contractors in reflective vests and steel-toed boots unloading gear near my pier. A third was installing a signpost in the grass. It read, "Future site of Silver Bay Community Marina, coming spring 2026, with a sleek HOA logo and a phone number at the bottom." "You lost?" I asked. One of them looked up. "We've got an install order for a project demo site." "HOA request. It's in our system," I blinked. "You're standing on my land." The man furrowed his brow. "This is parcel 47, right?" I walked over, unlocked the utility box on my post, and pulled out a laminated GPS-tagged plat map, held it up like a badge. "This is parcel 47, and I am the sole owner of every square foot under your boots. That post you're installing? Trespassing. That equipment? Trespassing. That HOA order, based on fraud and under criminal investigation." They didn't argue, just got on the radio and called someone. 10 minutes later, a gray SUV rolled up. A woman in business slacks stepped out. Clipboard, sunglasses, Bluetooth in ear. HOA contractor representative. Probably thought this was a routine miscommunication. I didn't let her speak. "You can pack up your fantasy marina and turn it into firewood," I said. "I've already filed restraining orders and trespass complaints." Next visit comes with sheriff deputies and a film crew. She started to protest, but paused when Tess barked from the porch. She took a beat, then turned around and left. I called Michelle. "They're still moving on the marina scam. They sent a construction crew to my property." She was silent a second. "That's retaliation. They're escalating. Can we stop it legally?" "I've already filed a cease and desist. But you may need something stronger. We're going to request an emergency injunction from the county judge. Will it hold?" "If I show the judge this fake permit application from the HOA," she said, "and the forged parcel overlay they submitted with it, it'll hold like concrete." That night, I emailed every HOA homeowner I could find. I didn't rant, I didn't accuse. I just attached the scanned permit file, the real parcel map, the whistleblower documents, and the plat overlay with metadata showing the falsified GPS stamps. Subject line, "Do you know what's being done in your name?" By morning, my inbox was a war zone. Half outraged, half embarrassed. People apologized. Some threatened lawsuits of their own. One guy wrote, "I've lived here 12 years and never saw where my dues went. Now I know. Fraud and fences." By noon, the Silver Bay HOA board voted to initiate full leadership dissolution proceedings. Karen hadn't been seen since her suspension. But then came the twist I didn't expect. That afternoon, I got a call from a local real estate developer named Blake Morrison. "I think we need to talk," he said, "about Ellsworth's promises and the land she tried to sell us. You're going to want to see the contracts." Blake Morrison showed up with a folder fat enough to stop a bullet. Real estate guy, pressed shirt, Rolex, soft handshake. Claimed he wanted to clear the air, which usually means avoid being named in a lawsuit. We sat on my porch. He opened the folder and laid out 3 documents: preliminary contracts, internal HOA communications, and a marketing pitch deck for Silver Bay Phase 2. My property, specifically the shoreline, was featured on page 3 as future recreational expansion. The plan showed a marina, 3 rental cabins, and a scenic walking trail. All of it overlaid onto my land without my knowledge or consent. Blake leaned in. "I was told this was under HOA jurisdiction. I wouldn't have touched it otherwise." "You mean Karen told you?" He hesitated. "It came through her." "Yeah. But she had a letter of authorization from the planning committee." I pulled up the county site on my tablet, showed him the map with parcel boundaries. "This is the legal boundary. That committee letter? Probably forged. That land, mine." Every tree, rock, and ripple, he stared at it. "If this is real, and I'm not saying it's not, we might be in serious breach." "You are." He left without finishing his coffee. That night, my lawyer filed for a full injunction. We attached Blake's documents, the forged overlays, and a statement from one of the Silver Bay board members who finally broke silence. Turns out Karen had been telling investors the HOA owned shared shoreline rights. A legal fiction unsupported by county records or deeds. Just lies. The injunction was granted the next day. County deputies served it directly to the Silver Bay HOA office. All further construction, signage, or enforcement activity within 100 meters of my property was now illegal by court order. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. 2 nights later, floodlights hit my house around midnight. I woke up to shouting near the shoreline. Tess barked. I grabbed my phone and crept outside. 3 figures in black HOA polos were on my dock. One had a bolt cutter. Another was trying to rechain my kayaks. The third had what looked like a spray can. I hit the floodlight switch and yelled, "You're on camera and under injunction. Step away now." They scattered, but not fast enough. My security cams caught everything. Faces, license plates, and one glorious shot of a guy tripping and falling straight into the water. Next morning, Michelle looped in the sheriff's department. Trespassing, destruction of property, violation of court order. Warrants went out within 24 hours. Meanwhile, the HOA board, what was left of it, publicly announced Karen Ellsworth's expulsion and cooperation with prosecutors. They painted themselves as victims, but it was too late. The state attorney general's office called me that afternoon. "We're opening a criminal fraud case," the investigator said, "and we'd like to meet." The meeting with the state investigator happened in a plain office downtown, nothing fancy, just a voice recorder, a notepad, and a very serious woman named Agent Lister. She already had the drone footage, the forged documents, the HOA patrol incident, and Blake's statement. All she needed was context and confirmation. By the end of the interview, she nodded once and said, "That's enough to indict." Karen Ellsworth was arrested the next morning, right in the middle of an investor brunch, no less. Cuffs, press, stunned silence. The footage hit local news by noon and went viral by evening. A self-declared protector of community standards hauled off for property fraud and falsifying county records. Delicious irony. The case moved fast. Too many witnesses. Too much evidence. Karen was sentenced to 14 years. The HOA was dissolved by court order. Members received restitution. And I got my shoreline back, legally, publicly, and permanently. Now, a custom-made wooden sign marks the dock. "Welcome to Nash Point. No HOA, no nonsense." On weekends, friends still come by. Kids paddle the lake. The grill sizzles and music floats over the water. And if anyone ever asks who owns the lake, I just smile and say, "Ask the court."